Hey, what's up, guys? So this is going to be the third Q&A session that I've done on the show. And I just want to start out by saying that, never in a million years did I think I would be sitting in front of a microphone responding to questions coming to me through the internet. But it's actually a very interesting experience, and it's humbling to be able to listen to some people's problems and then offer what I consider to be some viable pointers or solutions. And I suppose that this is interesting to me because, my entire life as a ranger, as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, as a police officer, I would consider myself average at best. And I don't say that in a disparaging manner. Like, I was a good ranger. I was proud of what I did. And I'll always hold those experiences close to my heart. But the truth is, I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the strongest. I wasn't the best shooter. I didn't have the best tactics. And that's why I always consider myself, when I look back on these different things, these different endeavors that I've taken on, average at best. And, it's one of those things where when you're not the fastest, when you're not the best shooter, when you're not the strongest, I think it's important to find your niche. And for me, the thing that I excelled on as a ranger, as a marshal, as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, was just being a good teammate, being a person that others could rely on. So regardless of what we were doing or what needed to be accomplished, I started to find myself being the guy that people could go to, people could trust, people could confide in. And that kind of became a role that I embraced. And so moving forward, after all the shit that happened this last year, and now I'm running my gym and I'm doing the podcast, it's kind of cool to see that role that used to be exclusive to teammates and coworkers is being felt by people around the world. And so, like I said, I'm humbled that people are willing to write me and talk about some of their issues that they're experiencing, and seeing if I can even give them a tiny piece of advice that may move the needle in a positive direction. I also got hit up by a guy during this Q&A session that I opened up, his name's Aaron, and I'm going to leave his last name out, but he gave a pretty heart-wrenching story about addiction. And, because I've talked about the homeless problem and the drug problems that I've dealt with as a police officer, he gave me a pretty good, I don't want to call it good, it was a heart-wrenching story, but it was articulated well, and about him growing up in an abusive family and his path to drugs and how it affected his life. And I think instead of talking about it on this episode, it'd be interesting to get that guy on and really hear about that aspect of our society from someone that's lived it and been through it. So if you're listening, I'm probably going to be reaching out to you, Aaron. I appreciate the email, man. Other than that, we're just going to go right into it. This week was there's some jiu-jitsu stuff, some police stuff, and then, just some lighthearted stuff, fishing and whatnot. So we're going to go right into it. So the first question is from Mackenzie, and she says, "Hi, Greg. I've been listening to your podcast since it started, and I follow your Instagram, and you're a very motivated person, which is an admirable trait to me. Currently, I was in the middle of the process of going to the police academy. I'm a young female that loves jiu-jitsu. I'm a blue belt. A lot of my skills and traits seem very parallel to that field, so I started the process. I did great on the exam and I was excited. I'm always very active and motivated in general, and I feel like I'd found my niche that I fit into. Since everything started going on between COVID and defund the police, they have froze the process and the program for at least 1 year. I was hoping you'd give some words of advice, as I was discouraged to hear this. I like knowing the goal and working towards that, and hearing it was froze was very disappointing." And so this is what I would say to you, Mackenzie. If being a police officer is something that is a calling to you, something that you feel that you have to give to your community, or it's something that is just inherently wired inside of you, that's a career field that just will fill your cup, I would say that a year is nothing. A year will be over before you know it. If the process that you started to get hired by a specific agency, or sometimes the hiring process is for a whole bunch of different agencies. If that process is frozen for 1 year, well, now you have 1 year to become that much better for when you do get to start the process over again. And I tell this to everybody. If you're looking to be a police officer simply because some agencies have decent pay and good benefits, you're barking up the wrong tree. That is something that you are going to find yourself looking back on years in the future and thinking it was probably not the wisest decision, because a lot of what comes as being a member of law enforcement is things that can be very stressful, can be hard on marriages, can be hard on your own psychology and your own mental health. And so there's no free lunch. While it's very rewarding and you do a lot of good things on one hand, it can be very detrimental to people on the other. And I don't say that to scare you away. I simply say that for you to take a look in the mirror and make sure that this is a calling that and a journey that you're ready to embark on. But like I said, if it's a 1 year hiring freeze, you have 1 year to become that much better of a person and as an officer. And I don't know how old you are, but you said you're a young lady. And so the profession of law enforcement sees people very often coming into the profession in their 30s and their 40s, and even sometimes in their 50s. And so don't allow 1 year to discourage you. Like I said, I don't know if you're applying to one specific agency or if you have, I know sometimes when you start the hiring process, you can list like 10 different agencies and whoever picks you up first is who you go with. But I would start the conversation with the agencies that you're interested in. Get your name, get your face out there, do some ride-alongs, show the leadership that you're not going to allow this temporary freeze to be something that takes an opportunity away from you. Show the leadership that you're using this freeze as an opportunity to become better prepared when the time does finally open up down the road where you get to start your process again. You know, sometimes I think the best results are spawned out of disappointment. I have to look at my own life over this last year, and I think about the emotional struggles that came with the situation that I faced. And while there was a lot of ups and downs, I'll tell you, I couldn't be happier. And this whole situation that I found myself in currently is spawned from something that in its surface kind of seemed like a very unfortunate event. And so I would say, think about that. You may have been discouraged and it may be something that's frustrating in real time. But when you look back on this in a year or 2 or 3 or 5, I think you'll probably realize that using this as an opportunity to become better and be more prepared for the job is something that will probably end up being a blessing in disguise. You know, as a new officer, remember the things that are important, obviously fitness, shooting, your health, jujitsu, all of those things are important to be successful as a police officer. But the 2 things that are the most underrated and spoken about the least, I would say, is that camaraderie, being a good teammate and being able to offer a strong sense of camaraderie to your coworkers and your peers, and then also having compassion for the public that you serve. The typical cookie cutter image of a police officer is that he's a dick or he's a hard ass or he's out writing tickets. And obviously those officers exist. That's why those stereotypes have become a reality. But most officers are actually compassionate, caring people. And when you bring that kind of energy to your community, they're going to see you as the officer that communities want and that communities desire. And so remember that. Be a good teammate. Figure out a way to work well with others, work with groups, be on a team, and then also don't lose compassion for people. That's one of the biggest things that I think makes good cops is they actually care about people. So make that a priority. Once you're there, stay out of department politics and stay out of drama. It is a cancer that will eat you alive. And the thing is, especially as a new officer, when you're a patrol level officer at the lowest level, you start getting wrapped up in what the sergeants and the commanders and the chiefs doing, and the unions fighting for this, and that leader is trying to do that. You can't affect much of those things anyways. I'm not saying put your head in the sand and not have a good understanding of and a good optic of the battlefield that you're serving in, but don't let it consume you. Don't allow all the things in the department that you can't change be something that eats away at you and starts to make you that disgruntled officer that so many of us in the profession are familiar with. So stay in your lane. I like to say eyes open, mouth shut when you're new, and just be the best version of yourself. And contrary to what we see on the news and what everybody's saying, there's a lot of good people in law enforcement, and it's still an admirable career that a lot of people love. And I know there's probably people listening saying like, what the fuck, dude, he's contradicting himself, because I have said that I am no longer willing to be part of that profession. And I have my reasons for that. And part of it is because as a 40-year-old man, I'm finding myself on my own trajectory and my own path. And I've arrived at a point in my life where I need to be steering this ship. And if I crash and burn, then it's on me. And if I find success and it's on me, then that's on me as well. And I've just reached a point where that's kind of my own path and my own heart. And so that's not to detract from the profession. I know a lot of people that are in it still that I hold in high regards. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. So with that said, best of luck, Mackenzie. Let me know how it goes. And I'm excited for you. All right. Next question. All right. This is from Nick. He said, I'm a BJJ blue belt and a newly promoted patrol sergeant on a small department. Our department has some nice mat areas, and I try and get the guys to come train once a week, but only a small group of the same guys routinely show up. How do I get my guys to understand the benefits of jiu-jitsu for policing? So I fought that for 10 years myself. When I was with the Marshal Service and when I was with the Port, I was one of the DT, defensive tactics guys, which I don't even like that name. I think they should be called OT, offensive tactics. Because once the fight's on, right? I'm not being defensive. I'm taking control of the situation, and I'm taking you into custody. But that's neither here nor there. The part of this question that I love is there is so much benefit to be gained by understanding the principles of grappling and jiu-jitsu as a patrol officer. There's so much to be gained. So why are so many people reluctant to do it? And I can tell you, in my experience, there's 5 to 10% of law enforcement officers take jiu-jitsu extremely seriously. There's probably another 10 to 15% that dabble in it, and then the rest just aren't interested. And it's always hard for me to wrap my head around this, because at the end of the day, your job as a police officer is to determine who has committed what crime. And if you've determined that someone has committed a crime, it is your job to take them into custody, which means you physically put your hands on that person and you take their freedom away, which is a serious thing. And so for you to voluntarily be in a position where you're going to make physical contact with people when some of those people are not too excited about what's happening and you don't want to have proficiency in that realm, it's mind-boggling to me. And I have to tell myself that it is simply rooted out of just not understanding reality. They have probably never had a 130-pound female on top of them that they couldn't do anything about. And so I always say, I have a female purple belt who is, and sorry if I mess this up, I think she's 25. So she's a young lady, and I'll regularly have her roll with the new police officers that come and sign up, because I want them to understand. And it's not an ego thing. It's not oh, look, you suck. You got beat up by a girl. No, this is what jiu-jitsu is. This is a 25-year-old female that can do whatever she wants to you. And you're a 200-pound male police officer. And I like to have that be an aha moment. And so people will go one of two ways. When they have that moment and where they realize, oh, wait a minute, I am extremely deficient in this. They can do one of two things. They can pursue it and start training and start to become better and put energy into it and understand the importance. Or there's people that just pretend, oh, that never happened, and they'll never speak of it again. And hopefully they never have another girl choking them out and in a situation where they can do nothing about it. And if that is who you are, I don't think you're wired to be a police officer. And that's my opinion, but it is what it is. If you don't want to train to be proficient at what you do, why are you doing what you do? You know, if you're a plumber or you're a programmer or you're a doctor or any profession, that individual should want to do their job well. Can you imagine getting surgery by a surgeon that doesn't think that it's important to know how to suture well? Like, it just doesn't make sense that you want to be a police officer, but you don't want to train on how to take people into custody. And so, you know, I would always tell the people, I think I've told this story on the podcast before. When I was training DT at my last department and we'd have a circle of people there, I'd be like, hey, how many people in this room think Conor McGregor, and I use him just because he's the most well-known fighter, how many people in this room think Conor McGregor trains 2 times a year? And everybody laughs and chuckles. And I say, no, I'm actually being serious. Is there anyone that thinks he trains 2 times a year? Because you guys train 2 times a year. And if you think that you will be able to have any type of proficiency or any success with the techniques that we're about to show you, doing them twice a year, you're telling yourself a lie. But the reason that I bring up Conor McGregor is we have a professional athlete who is knowing that he's going to get into a fight. But the fight that he's getting into has referees, it has rules, it has times. And if things get too bad, guess what? The fight is over. So he's going into a fight with those rule sets, and he trains his ass off. Now, for the patrol level police officer, I'm willing to bet almost every single person on patrol gets into at least 2 or 3 physical altercations a year, right? So just like Conor McGregor, you know the fight's coming. You know there's a fight on the horizon. You don't know who it's going to be with. You don't know how serious it's going to be. You don't know their skill set. You don't know if they have weapons. You know nothing about what's going to happen other than it's pretty reasonable to say, I'm going to get in a fight this year. So if you know that to be the case, why are you not training for it? The thing about your fight that's different than Conor McGregor's is your fight is not going to have a rule set. Your fight is not going to have a bell that rings when it's time to stand up and be done with it. And it may not end until that person has taken everything from you, up and including your life. The stakes are so much higher for police officers when they get in altercations, yet they still don't want to train. The other thing that is important for police officers to realize is that knowing how to fight and being proficient at combat is actually a de-escalation tool. If someone starts to puff their chest or run their mouth or act like they're going to do this or that, if you know in the back of your mind, okay, he wants to go, I'm ready. You don't have to project this. You don't have to puff your chest out and act like a tough guy. You can just be calm and be ready. And that's the kind of energy that actually de-escalates, because there's officers that they're probably more responsible than the other guy for instigating the altercation. And so once you're comfortable in who you are and you're confident in your abilities, you can approach people and be kind and not have to belittle them or swear at them or make it a big dick contest. You can just be like, hey man, what's going on? Check it out. You got a warrant for this, and just do your thing in a manner that's calm and collected. And I think fighting is something that really, really helps officers be calm in the face of adversity. As far as getting your officers interested in jiu-jitsu, there's different things you can do. You can incentivize them I don't know. I mean, every department is part of a different union, and that's a fucking nightmare that you have to sift through to see what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. But look through that and figure out through your bargaining agreement, like, what can you do to incentivize them? Can you give them an hour of comp time if they decide to train for an hour? Or can you set up training so it's on department time so they're getting paid? And I know that there's a lot of people like, I'm not going to come in and train in my off time. And it's like, well, you're not taking this job very seriously then. But if you're one of those people that wants to be compensated for your time for your 1 hour a week or whatever, maybe there's a way that you can modify the patrol shift or the patrol schedule. So you said you're a small department, so I guess that might be tough. But at any given time on patrol, maybe you could have 2 guys off for an hour and allow them to focus on martial arts or their physical fitness. Other things you can do is literally talk to your chain of command and see if you can implement this as department training and make it mandatory. I know there was you can Google this, Marietta, Georgia. There was a police department there that made jiu-jitsu mandatory. And I don't know how long they did this for, but they had a period of time where they made jiu-jitsu mandatory. And then they just looked at some of their statistics. And like, I'll just read this. This is you can Google this. This is an article off of, I don't know, I think it was MSNBC or something. And it says, according to a release outlining the data, officers who had been trained in jiu-jitsu were injured themselves during a forceful arrest 48% less often than officers who hadn't been trained. And those being forcefully arrested were injured 53% less often with officers that had been trained than those who had not been trained. And so this is the biggest misconception that people don't realize about police officers utilizing jiu-jitsu. You got all these idiots nationwide saying, don't use chokeholds and you can't twist their arm and you can't do this. And again, it's a bunch of people that have never fucking trained and never arrested anybody telling guys like us how to do our job. The truth is, when you are a proficient grappler, it is safer for both you as the officer and the person being arrested. And so with all that being understood, you have to figure out a way to incentivize your police officers to train. If they don't want to train, I mean, you can lead a horse to water, right? There's only so much you can do, but it's imperative. If this is your chosen profession, I mean, that's out of the Ranger Creed. And that's something that I stand by. It's like your chosen profession. You chose to be here. You raised your right hand and you took the oath. Like, nobody forced you to do this. If that's what you have chosen to do with your life, you owe it to your family, you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to the community to be good at what you do. And so go read that Marietta, Georgia article and show that to your patrol officers. This isn't smoke and mirrors. This isn't just some flavor of the week thing. This is a real thing. And the other thing that I would say to do is next time you have department training, go to your local gym, find a 24-year-old female purple belt that is a monster, and have her put some of those guys through the ringer. And again, it's not to belittle them or make them feel like shit. It's to show them, check it out. This is what it feels like to have somebody on top of you that knows what they're doing. And a lot of times especially men, once men feel this huge deficiency in their skill set, that in itself can motivate. If that doesn't motivate them, well, you probably got some dead weight on your department. And like I've said before, don't be dead weight. All right. So next question. This guy gives a pretty long and in-depth background as to some of the hardships that he's faced. He says he's 24 years old. He doesn't have a single decent memory of his father, who was an abusive drunk. He said his mother just turned a blind eye to it and blamed him for both the physical and the sexual abuse that he endured. And he goes on and on about a lot of emotional hardships. And so the crux of his question is this: do you believe that some people are simply born to push through pain, born with this indestructible will to keep getting back up after life knocks you down? And with that same notion, are some people born without it? I can never understand what that desire to never quit is like. And so this is from Alexander. And man, reading his stuff, he lost a child. He grew up in an extremely abusive household. And that's one of those things that he's asking me about the never quit mentality, because I never quit as a ranger or as a fighter. These different things, these different aspects of my life where I had to employ like never giving up and being hard. But I can't even begin to put myself in this situation. You know, I'll definitely go into it and share my thoughts on it. But the fucked up thing about this world is we're not all equal. And as hard as that is for some people to hear, I grew up in a house with a real hard dad who pushed me and wasn't very kind to me, but he loved me and he never abused me. And I have to think that his hardness is part of what helped me grow into the man I am today. So I look back on that and I wonder, was that good or was that bad? And I guess I'll never really know the answer to that question. But my point of bringing that up is my household was stable. My parents treated me in a manner that was, looking back on, I don't have any complaints about it. I was never abused or molested or any of that. And for this guy to go through this his entire childhood and then ask me about mental toughness, man, again, it's humbling. So I would say this, Alexander, in my opinion, blood is not family. Family is the tribe that we create and that you need. All right. So I think we're social creatures, and that need to feel love and be around other people, it's a primal void. And I've known, I've never went through the types of hardships that you've went through, but I know when things aren't good in my house, they're not good anywhere. Your house is where you need to be able to go home, and now I can decompress. I can take my armor off. I can feel vulnerable. I don't have to be on alert. I can just, and you can fake and project outward happiness to a lot of people, but a lot of times it's a facade. And I say that because I've been there before. And so how do you fix it? Again, I can't use the term circle back anymore. As I say, I'm going to circle back to the crux of your question about simply is mental toughness, and is that something that people are born with, or is that something that is acquired? But before we go into that, I just want to touch on some of the things, because your email was very personal and it talked about a lot of traumatic experiences from your family. And for me, getting through my traumatic experiences, and I've talked about this openly, and I enjoy talking about it now, because I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, a guy like you talking about counseling or talking about mental health, like, it kind of gives us a pass to be able to talk about it and be open about it. Because me included, a lot of people are afraid to be vulnerable. And I was for a long time. And I reached a point after like I've said before, I've seen a lot of friends commit suicide. I've seen a lot of friends be in depression. And these are some of the toughest men I know. I've reached a point where I'm like, fuck it. There's nothing embarrassing about what's going on here. It's an epidemic, and mental health is a big thing that we need to talk about. So for me, the first thing was counseling, talking to other people about your problems. And again, I don't know why this is a kind of like an abstract idea, but it's actually refreshing. And counselors are not judging you. They're not part of your circle. They're not part of your community. They're not part of your clique. So you can really just bounce ideas off them, share things in a manner where you're not feeling like you're being judged. and it allows you to be vulnerable. And so I always recommend that. That's the first thing that I recommend. And if you're like me, you're probably thinking, fuck counseling, because I was me for a decade. But once I finally went, I realized the benefits and how good it can actually be. You have to be willing to accept some change, and you have to surround yourself with people that genuinely want to see you do well. And that's easier said than done. People are strange. And even at the highest levels of family and business and relationships, there's still people that exude jealousy and insecurities and rivalries. And that kind of shit has no business in your inner circle. I don't even know if I should say I've created, but I've found myself in a circle of people that we call them the tribe, because it's a group of people that they're winners. They're good at what they do. They're good people. They're raising good families. They're motivated. They're training. They're concerned about their health. Like all these things that are important to me, I've found a community of people that I've immersed myself in that share all of these. And we're never in competition with each other. And it's actually pretty refreshing to just, man, it's all good, you know? Love is a mandatory emotion. And in my opinion, it's as vital as water. And if you don't have that with your family, you need to find it somewhere. You need to find a community of people that genuinely love you for who you are and be able to experience that emotion and that part of just being a human being. It's as mandatory as water, in my opinion. Do I think people are born with mental toughness and resolve? I would say a mixture of both of those things. You often see people say you can't teach heart. And that's something that I disagree with. And I've been open about that before, because if you can't teach heart, why are we having our rangers hold logs over their heads for hours on end? Why are we making them do road marches to the point where they feel like they're going to die? I think that you actually can teach heart. And really, by teaching people that they are tougher than they previously believed that they are, that starts to show them, oh, this is what I'm capable of. So even though the body may have been capable of putting itself through some of those things, I think through training and experience, your mind starts to catch up. Your mind starts to realize, oh, this is what I'm capable of. This is how much I can endure. And so, I've talked about it a lot with jiu-jitsu and MMA. When you have a guy who's mounting you and punching you in the face, or he's choking you and you can't breathe because all his weight's on your diaphragm, there's a point where your body reaches its fight or flight mechanism and you can't get away from the guy. So flight is not an option. And you're fighting him right now and he's beating you up. So fight is also not an option. So you just ran out of both of your primal options. And option number 3 that kicks in is anxiety, because it feels like you're dying. Even though you're on your mats and you're training with a friend, the body doesn't know the difference and it literally feels like you're dying. So I think that through training and experience, you can absolutely hone your physical toughness, but through physical toughness, it also hones mental toughness. Now, in regards to your situation, I refer to the things that you're dealing with as the darkness. That's what I used to refer to it as inside of myself, is just that pit of emptiness and despair and hatred. And the darkness runs deeper than mental toughness. It runs deeper than physical toughness. The darkness for me attacks my self-worth. And, when you feel like you're a burden and you detract from others as opposed to building them up and enhancing their lives, it becomes easy to convince yourself that your entire existence is just bothersome to others. And I know in your message, you talked about like suicidal ideations with some people. And I think that comes down to how they perceive their darkness more than how they are, if they're mentally tough or if they're physically tough or if they have heart. Because some of the guys that I've known that have taken their own lives were studs, both mentally and physically, studs. But the darkness is a different thing. And I think it's important to distinguish those two things because you may develop mental and physical toughness and the desire and the will to never quit and never give up. But if you have that overwhelming feeling of just not having a sense of worth, that's what starts to attack guys like us when we're feeling that depressive state. And I'm very open about it, and I'm happy to say that, like, I haven't found myself there in a long time. And it's something that I always keep an eye out for, because once you've been there and you've worked through it, I think that's one of the biggest keys to future success, is that some people can't see through the darkness and what's on the other side, and they're consumed by it. And I believe that's a big part of people being able to understand that the darkness is a moment in time. The darkness is this moment of my life, as opposed to this is my life. So I want to say that again, because I think that that's, for me, that was one of the biggest tools that I found beneficial when I was dealing with depression and suicidal ideations. And that is that the darkness is a moment in my life, as opposed to this is my life. And, you know, my counselor told me, she said, I want you to think of the darkness as a storm. Like, you're literally engulfed in this storm, and it's swirling around you, and it's dumping water on you, and there's thunder and there's lightning, and it's fucked up and it's scary. You're having a hard time getting your bearing. And when you're in the middle of that, it may be difficult to think one day these clouds are going to break. The sun's going to shine on me again. I'm going to dry out. I'm going to feel the warmth on my face, and things are going to be good again. When you're in the middle of that, when you're in the middle of the storm, you're not thinking about the sun shining on you again. You're thinking about, this is fucked. There's no way out. I'm stuck in this forever, and I would rather just be gone than have this be my reality. And I like to think of that as a trick that your brain plays on you. You start to think that I'm in despair. I don't fucking have a way out. And then you start to convince yourself that people in your life don't like you anyways, and you just cause problems for them, and you're a burden to them. And so the trick that you're playing on your own brain starts to give you an exit strategy, and it starts to morally justify you taking your own life. That's why so many people do it. That's exactly why so many people do it. And I honestly believe if they could just detach for a moment in time from the absolute emotional shitstorm that's swirling around them, and just detach and look at themselves from the outside and say, okay, right now sucks. My life feels like it's falling apart. I don't feel like I have good relationships with people. I'm financially struggling. Like, all of these things that contribute to feeling like you don't have worth. All of these things can be mitigated if you can just detach and realize all the things that you just said about yourself are what you are currently experiencing today. But that doesn't mean that's what you're going to experience tomorrow or the day after that. And you just have to tell yourself that it can get better and that it will get better. But it's not going to get better by some magic pill or some fucking prescription. It's going to get better by you doing the work, just like any aspect of life. You got to do the work. You got to get your brain healthy. You got to get your body healthy. You got to build healthy relationships with people. And I can tell you that you can do those things. And if you're telling yourself you can't, it's because you're falling into the victim mentality. No, you don't understand. Like, you don't understand my family, or you don't understand this, or you don't understand that. And it's like, I've known people that are very close to me that came from really, really, really fucked up childhoods, similar to what you just told me in the email, that have been able to put it behind them. Maybe not 100%. I mean, you're always going to carry that baggage to a certain extent. But just carrying that baggage shouldn't be weighing you down and changing the trajectory of your life. So remember that. At the end of the day, you have to be willing to put the work in, and you have to be vulnerable, and then you have to understand that no matter how bad it is today, that tomorrow could be better. And it could be better if you're willing to make it better. But if you're not willing to look in the mirror and come and draw those conclusions, it becomes Groundhog's Day. You'll wake up day after day after day feeling like this is just a miserable existence until my inevitable demise. And if you believe that thing, you believe those things to be true, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you find yourself living in this depressed state. You find yourself in the pit that you can't crawl out of. And so, at the end of the day, it's very unfortunate that you grew up the way that you did, but you got to do the work. You got to get back up on your feet, and you have to be willing to put the work in and find success in this life. So best wishes to you. Write me again, stay in touch. Let me know how it goes, man. It's, obviously I can't have relationships with every single person that's writing me, but I do read the emails that come through, and I like seeing that when people have done something to change the trajectory of their life and it's working out. All right. So next question. And these are two questions, but they're basically the same question. So I'm just going to read them together. This is from Garrett. He says, I'm a former Marine. I'm currently a patrol deputy in Central Florida. I've been contemplating applying for the U.S. Marshal Service. I just want to get some of your insight from the agency or somebody from the agency who actually served with them. What were your reasons for leaving? Do you think it's worth applying for? Thank you for your time. And then this question from Hunter. Can you give me more in-depth on what you did in the Marshals? Like, was it sitting in court, or was the job actually going out and catching felons? And what is the special operations part of the Marshal Service like that you did? And what are some of the things that they do, if you know? And so I'm going to put this out right out of the gates. I was not part of special operations group with the Marshal Service. It was something that I was interested in, and had I stayed with the agency, I probably would have pursued that. But what I was part of, and maybe I haven't articulated this properly, was SRT, the Special Response Team. So the difference between SRT and SOG, Special Operations Group, is SRTs are the Special Response Team for the district. My district was Central California. When there was a matrix, when warrants would come down the pipe, and if it was a violent felon, or there was gun charges, or it was like there was supposed to be shot callers or like high-ranking individuals, like whatever the case may be, anything that would, or like a high amount of drugs, anything that would bump this arrest warrant up in the level of importance or the level of danger, there was a matrix. And once a certain amount of things were met, that warrant would be handed over to SRT. And that's the team that I was on in California. It's a 16-man team, and our specialty was just serving high-risk warrants. Now, I always tell people, if SRT was a full-time job with the Marshal Service, I would still live in Los Angeles and be a deputy to this day. I love that team. I love the guys on it. I love the mission, and it was fucking awesome. There was no drama. The district, I don't know how many, there might be 120 deputies or something like that in the district, the Central District of California. But the SRT team was 16 man. We were super tight knit. Everybody got along. We worked out together. We shot together. And that kind of filled my void from what I was looking for when I got out of the Ranger Regiment. I really love that team. When I went to Los Angeles last week and went out to dinner with a bunch of guys from the SRT team, and it was literally like old times. It was awesome. But this is what I will say about the SRT team. We probably served one warrant a month because, like I said, there was the matrix that had to determine what warrants rose to the level of employing the SRT team. And so one, maybe two warrants a month, while I love the team, I love the training, and I love the mission, for an entire career, it wasn't sitting well with me. The Marshal Service will, and again, let me lead with this. There are 94 different districts. Every district has their own way of doing business. And so my experience in Los Angeles with the Marshal Service could be night and day different from what you may experience in Dallas or Chicago or DC. Any of the cities, any of the big cities really have their own way of doing things. And so this is just the experience from Central California. But I'll tell you this, the leadership that I worked for in Central California under the Marshal Service was a fucking dumpster fire, to put it lightly. You know, I geek out on leadership. I love leadership. I like to read books on leadership. And a lot of it stems from me working under some of the best men on planet Earth. And when you're working for people that have your back and that, and more importantly, have your best interest in mind, it makes the mission easy. I don't give a fuck if I'm going to take a bullet. I know this guy has my back, and I know his primary focus is making sure that I'm successful. I'll walk into fire for that guy or that gal. But I didn't experience that at all. And I can tell you, this isn't just me being crazy Anderson and being disgruntled because of inept leadership. The whole district felt it. Every single deputy in Southern California, or Central California rather, despise the leadership that we dealt with in the Marshal Service from 2011 to 2015. And it was, it's just a lot of leaders in that agency are self-serving. They're selfish people. Their primary focus is on their promotions and their packets and how they look to their higher ups. Their primary focus is not taking care of their deputies. And it makes me sad because the agency has a lot of potential, but how they promote people is not based on merit. It's based on who's raising their hand the highest, saying me, 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 me. And I feel like if you're a person that wants to promote and you're willing to claw your way to the top, very rarely do you get the best person, because the best people that are suited to lead in those situations very often don't want to be at the top. You know, when I got promoted to sergeant in 2nd Ranger Battalion, I just got called in the hooch one day and we were in Afghanistan. They said, Greg, you're a sergeant now. Your team is Alpha 3-1. Go ahead and link up with your guys. And I was like, what? I don't want to be a sergeant. Like, what are you fucking talking about? I enjoyed being a Tab Spec 4, the biggest sham job in the entire military. But they determined that it was time. And I think that there's a big part of leadership that should be structured like that. You should have competent people deciding who is going to make the best leader, not people trying to claw the eyes out of their peers, trying to work their way to the top. I saw a lot of inept leadership. And so even though I would say there was a lot of great people in the agency, some of my best friends to this day are guys and gals that I worked with in the Marshal Service. But there's a lot of shitty people in the agency too. And I don't say that to like try and poo-poo on the Marshal Service. It's just my experience. There's a lot of fucking people in that agency that are fat and weak and late and have poor attitudes and file grievances on each other. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I saw grievances filed from one deputy to another almost weekly in Central California. And you got to think about that. Like, for example, I have a friend who was carrying a taser, and in the Marshal Service, you have to have a qual every, I don't even remember if it's an annual qual or a biannual qual to have your taser. And all our quals are on a public shared drive, not public, but within the agency. And so anyone in the agency has access to the shared drive. You can go look, you can see who has quals and whose quals have expired. So this guy's looking through people's quals, found one that's expired. Oh, this guy has an expired qual, walks out, looks, sees that he has a taser on his belt. Uh-oh, his qual's expired and he's wearing his taser. That's a violation of policy. Boom. Writes a complaint to headquarters. not even the district, to headquarters. Think about that. That's someone that I should be comfortable going through a door with and confronting a violent felon. But you're going to tell on me like a little fucking baby because my taser qual expired a month ago. And I saw enough of that kind of shit that I realized while there are a lot of good aspects of this agency, there's enough bullshit. I'm not willing to give them 20 years of my life. This is my one life. And I'm not going to live in a manner where I'm having to fucking watch my back from not only the felons that we're supposed to be dealing with, but my own coworkers. And so I became less and less interested in doing a whole career with the Marshal Service because of incidents like that. I can tell you a couple more incidents that happened to me personally. I had the chief, actually he was the A chief of the district, called me in his office one day. And I was well liked. I was on the SRT team. I was a go-to guy. Like I didn't have anything negative in my file. And anybody that's worked with me down there will corroborate that. So he called me in his office one day and he goes, "Hey, Greg, I'm going to need you to file a grievance on Deputy so-and-so." And I said, "What are you talking about, Chief?" He goes, "Well, it's been brought to our attention that he said some things that are a violation of policy. And we were hoping that we could get some of this stuff on paper because he needs to be disciplined for it. So I'd really appreciate it if you would say you heard him say this." I'm like, "Well, check it out. This is how I roll, Chief. If I heard Deputy so-and-so say something that I found to be offensive, I would confront him personally. And I would say, hey, why are you doing or saying this?" I said, if he wasn't willing to talk about it, I said, and it became a big issue, it could rise all the way to the level where him and I go down into the parking lot and fight. Like, that's where it could go for me. Where it's not going to go for me is me doing paperwork on someone behind their back and never confronting him as a man. And additionally, I have nothing to gain and a lot to lose by interjecting myself into these weird little pissing matches that I see going on all over the district. So I said, "Sorry, but I'm not interested in getting involved." And I'm not exaggerating when I say from that moment forward, my chief thought I was a piece of shit. Like, he even said, like, "Greg, listen, this could be the nail in his coffin. This could be we could finally get this guy out of the district. He's been a cancer. We could use your help." And so a couple more incidents like that. And I realized, no, this agency is not something I'm interested in pursuing for a lifelong career. Additionally, we sat in court and we transported prisoners for 10 hours a day. That's what we did. You know, there are warrants that get worked, but warrants were the exception. They were not the rule. And so sitting in court, and I'm not exaggerating when I say you'd sit in court for 8+ hours a day, just listening to a trial that goes on for weeks. And then you get in a car and you drive the guy back to San Bernardino jail. And then you do the same thing the next day and you sit 8 hours a day. And so not only was the mission not what I wanted, but the chain of command was weak and it was starting to affect my life on a personal level. Me and the wife weren't good. I was disgruntled a lot. And so one thing that really made it crystal clear that it was time to tell the Marshal Service to fuck themselves was my dad got terminally ill and he was diagnosed with dementia, and it progressively got worse and worse and worse. And it got to a point where they said he had so long to live. I think it was 6 months. And so I went to my chain of command. I said, "Hey, check it out. I've been deployed for the last 10 years. The whole reason that I put the military and paramilitary lifestyle behind me is because I wanted to focus on making family a priority again. My dad only has a few months left to live. What are my options to be with him during this time?" And I got all of these fucking answers about, well, you can TDY up there. You can put in for a duty station transfer. You can do this. You can do that. You can do this. You can do that. I said, okay, well, I'm going to start trying to figure out implementing one of these measures because the clock is going. And so I tried to do a transfer. I tried to do a TDY. Oh, that's not going to work for this reason or that reason. Oh, we're a little short on bodies down here, and the Seattle office is actually at a surplus, so we're not going to be able to do that. And that's fine. The Marshal Service doesn't have to fucking change the way they do business for me. I get that, right? But I put in for what's called a medical hardship. And it's if a person in your family is terminally ill or somebody needs your family, you need to be around a family member because they're going through a medical hardship. So I put that in. And the response I got from headquarters, and I still have the email. If you want to fucking see it, I will text it to you on Instagram. It said, if your dad wants to be with you during these next few months, he can entertain moving to Los Angeles. Additionally, the Marshal Service isn't going to foot the bill for anything. That was it. That was it for me. Like, I am a man of principle, and I have been for a long time. And again, when you tell me that my fucking dying dad can move to Los Angeles if he wants to be with me, we're fucking done. We got nothing else to discuss. So I walked right into my supervisor's office. I showed him the email, and I said, I dare anybody in this district to say this to my face right now. I dare anybody. Oh, calm down, Anderson. Listen. No, I said, no, I'm not fucking calming down. I said, some little fucking twerp from DC just sent me the most offensive fucking message I've ever read in my life. And if he were here, I'd smash his fucking skull in. So I tried to be reasonable and figure out a way to be with my dad. And now you guys are forcing me to be unreasonable. So I'm out of here. And I fucking left. I logged into our what's called Web TNA. And I put myself on 6 months of administrative leave, and I left. And everybody's like, oh, what are you fucking doing? That's crazy. Like the Marshal Service is such a pristine agency and it's hard to get into. And yeah, I get all that. But once you show me that I'm not a priority, you can fuck yourselves. Like, I'm not going to work for an agency that I may lose my life going through a door. When it comes time for them to give back to me just a little bit, they don't even give a shit. Not only did they not give a shit, they decided to say something offensive to me. His name's Brian Snell. He's with the U.S. Marshal Service. And if I ever fucking see you, I'm going to break your goddamn nose. Okay? So that is why I am no longer with the Marshal Service. I moved home to be with my dad, and I was home for 5 weeks before he passed. So I have never regretted doing that for a moment in time, because me and my dad got a lot of closure. We spent a lot of time together. And to tell you the truth, I think he was just clinging on to life until I moved home. So he knew that I would be home with my mom and my sister after he passed. So that's my Marshal Service story. Other than that, I would say a lot of drama in the agency. There's LEAP, which is the law enforcement availability pay. And that's what I consider fucking illegal, because the Marshal Service says they can work you up to 16 hours a day and not pay you overtime because you get paid LEAP, which is availability pay. And you can look into that if you want to. I'm not going to go into details, but I'll tell you what, we always used to joke, LEAP is like the house at the casino. They always come out on top. They're not losing money by paying you extra for availability because they get that. They squeeze that out of you. Trust me. And, we would work with TFOs who would basically they'd be sworn deputies just doing the same job that we would do, but they would be from local agencies. And these guys would get money all night long on overtime where we didn't get paid anything. And so financially, you're not going to make a lot of money as a deputy. And I mean, there are some niches that you can go find, like the WITSET programs or JSI, and you can do decent. But it's just a plain old deputy, a POD. It's tough, man. It's tough. And the Los Angeles office, again, was just universally kind of despised. All right. So enough on the Marshal Service. If you got more questions, hit me up on the Marshal Service. Again, I'm open about my experience, but that agency just wasn't for me. And everybody knows what happened with the port. So I'm 2 for 2. And that is why, again, I don't think law enforcement is for me. Last question from Boyden. It says, what are your next steps to get ready if things go bad and you can't get to your pad in Idaho? I think that's where it is. I'll tell you, the pad that I'm building, I'm not going to give any particulars over the air, but it's pretty close. It's not in Idaho. Idaho was my old bug out plan with my buddy Seth and his ranch out in Coeur d'Alene. But after his passing 6 months ago, the plans have shifted. And so we're in the process of, we're actually closing on it now as a piece of property in the mountains that are local. And I'll be able to get to it. I could get to it on foot if I had to. And so it's remote, but it's not so remote that I can't get to it. But outside of that, what am I doing to prepare? And I really like this question because there was probably, between the time I got fired and the time Biden was inaugurated, my fucking brain was spinning on the revolution, on fighting in the streets, on procuring weapons and ammunition and batteries and night vision. And I got ham radios and I got an extra fuel tank for the truck. Like, I was thinking and thinking and thinking on it. But I've arrived to the point where I've realized I can put energy into preparing for worst case scenario, but not be fixated on it in a negative manner. And so that's kind of where I've arrived at. I've detached a little bit from Instagram. If you look at my Instagram, it's my daughter shooting a bow. It's me jumping in a frozen lake. It's like, it's things that bring me joy. It's not Joe Biden saying he's taking my guns, because if you want to fucking come take my guns, then we're going to have it out when that time comes. The things that I need to do to be prepared for that moment is maintain a high level of fitness, maintain a high level of proficiency with my weapon systems, maintain accountability of my gear, develop healthy relationships with people, have a good comms and communication plan. And it's almost like I had an aha moment a month ago. I realized all the things that I would do to be successful in a worst case scenario are the same things that are going to benefit my life in a best case scenario. So if I focus on my health and my happiness and my family and my security, and I obtain this piece of property and I build a cabin out there and I kind of set it up as an off-grid location and nothing bad ever happens, that'll be a great place for me and my family to go detach, have the dogs running around and go shooting and hang out at the river with my girls. Like, that's going to be a great piece of property if nothing bad ever happens. Those are going to be great skill sets to have if nothing bad ever happens. My health and my fitness are going to be great to build on regardless if nothing bad ever happens. So that's where I'm at on this stuff. I'm going to continue to put focus on those things, but I'm not going to allow it to consume me anymore, because it was to the point, like, when I opened my gym against the COVID restrictions, I was bringing my rifle to practice. And I was like, no one's shutting me fucking down. If they send the fucking cops here to try and arrest me for teaching people jujitsu, then we're going to have to fight to the death. Like, that's how it's going to have to be. And I was spun the fuck up for a long time. And I don't think that that's a necessarily a bad place, a bad headspace to be in, because you have to be willing to fight for what you love and what you believe in and what is yours. And I thought long and hard on it. And I arrived at a point where I knew this is what I believe. This is what's important to me, and nobody can take it. But with that mindset came a lot of, I don't want to say anxiety, because there's a part of me that was almost welcoming it, which is not healthy. That's probably just my fucking PTS kicking up. But there was a part of me that was like, yes, conflict is on the horizon and I can't fucking wait. But I don't need to be feeling that as a 40-year-old man. And I certainly don't need to be feeling that inside of my country. Like, again, if it happens, I'll be ready. But to kind of hope that it's or create a self-fulfilling prophecy where I find myself in conflict with fellow Americans or law enforcement, the reality of it is I'm going to find myself in a situation where my girls are not being raised with their dad. And that's all fine and good. If I have to die for my beliefs, I have to die for my beliefs. And I still stand behind that. And there's still a part of me that thinks that's probably what's going to fucking happen at some point. But I don't have to create it, and I don't have to will that to happen. What I have to create and what I have to will is stability and happiness and peace within my household, my family, and my community. And if I get pushed to the brink by exterior forces, and it has to turn into some type of violent encounter at some point, then so be it. But I don't want that to be on me. I want that to be on them. And if that's what happens, then that's what happens. And, I'm not one of these like tinfoil hat wearers. I'm not fucking out on the fringes. I'm a pretty grounded person. But if you don't think that there's a possibility for violence in our own country based on all the instability and the political divide and what these political elite are doing to us, if you don't believe that's a possibility, I just don't think you're being honest with yourself. But even with the very real possibility that we may face that in the near or far future, it shouldn't consume who you are. And it shouldn't dictate your happiness. And it shouldn't dictate the things that we do with our loved ones. And we shouldn't allow that to detract from joy. And so that is kind of where I've arrived on all that stuff. The pad will be accessible for me. And I'm going to use it often. And if it's just me playing with my kids, cool. If it's with me with my Remington 700 in a ghillie suit, then that's what it is too. We'll see where it goes. Your guess is as good as mine though. I get a lot of people asking what's going to happen when this goes down or what's going to happen when that goes down. The truth is I'm just a fucking dude like you. And I am just as shocked and confused about 2020 as the rest of us. So we're at 1 hour and 8 minutes. I got a couple little follow-up questions from this guy, and then we're going to wrap this up. Said, if I thought about having Sean Whalen on the podcast. We follow each other. We've talked a little bit, but nothing is official. For me, I don't want to get in the habit of doing Zoom podcasts because I feel like it's just not as authentic as when you're sitting there with that person. You can feel their energy. So I've kicked the idea around of having some different people on the podcast throughout the country, but I'm either going to have to fly them out or I'm going to have to fly to them because I don't want to get, like I said, I don't want to get in the habit of Zooming. Do you read Jordan Peterson's books? No, I do not. And not because I do not like Jordan Peterson, but because I don't think I'm intelligent enough to read his books. And I'm not saying that in like a self-deprecating way. I bought one of his books. I forget what it was called. I think it's the 12 rules or whatever. And, a chapter into it, I realize I'm not retaining any of this. This is above my skill level as a reader. And so that's how I've been my whole life. All through school, I would read books. And if I wasn't engaged by the book, it would be like in one ear and out the other, like I would not retain anything. And that goes for like reading or listening to them, like on Audible. And so I've tried to, for the first time in my life, and again, reading is something that I have battled forever. I want to put more of a priority on it. And I go through like stages. There's an ebb and flow. But if I read a chapter out of a book and I don't like it, I'm done. Back on the bookshelf it goes. Because there's enough books out there that will captivate me and pull me in. And those are the books that I learn from because they imprint on me and they create a lasting memory. And that's the whole reason we read, right? To create that. And so we are consistently building our intelligence and our understanding of things. And so, yeah, sorry, but Jordan Peterson, he's too fucking smart for me. I think that's what it boils down to. Last question. Do you have any fishing goals this year? Yes. I have a lot of fishing goals. And you guys that follow me probably know I love boating. I have a Wooldridge offshore pilot house and the best fucking boat company in the Pacific Northwest. And that's been a big part of my family. That's what we do in the summers. But COVID kind of ruined that for us this year. We got out a few times and I had a good lingcod season. Didn't catch shit for salmon this year, but that's also because it's Puget Sound. It's not very good salmon fishing in my experience. But no, I want to get out a lot more this summer. I want to get a halibut. I want to get a big halibut this year. And if I have to go off of Westport or out into the open water, that might be what I have to do, because I know Puget Sound is not good halibut fishing. But no, I'm looking forward to another good ling season. We got some good spots up in the San Juan Islands. And if anyone knows how to fucking catch salmon around here, let me know, because we keep coming up dry time and time again. So that's it for today. I appreciate you guys listening. We're going to keep bringing you guys good guests. And again, the best way that you can support the show, if you enjoy any of the content that we're putting out, or you enjoy the guests that I'm having, is go to the show notes and click some of those sponsors links. And even if you buy the cheapest thing on their website, if you buy one grass-fed beef stick from Paleo Valley, what that does is it shows these companies that my listeners are hearing about their products, and then you guys are engaging with them. And so I'd appreciate that. That's the best way you can support the show. And we'll be back with good content soon. Thanks, guys.